Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. I had the privilege of sitting down with Monica May, a radio host whose story is nothing short of inspiring. Monica's journey began in the projects of New York, where she learned the value of hard work, resilience, and survival. Qualities that would later define her remarkable career in radio. You can hear Monica on Star 94.5 hosting Monica May's Point of View. Many conversations are built on today's hot topics and issues concerning African Americans. Monica's journey in radio is just one part of her incredible story. Beyond her professional success, she has made it her mission to give back to the community by educating and empowering young girls. Drawing from her own experiences, Monica understands the challenges that many young women face. Recognizing the need for better education and support around issues like teen pregnancy, drugs, and sex education, Monica launched the nonprofit Let's Spill the Tea, breaking communication barriers between parents and teenagers during critical young adult years. Tune in to hear more about Monica May's incredible journey and the powerful work she's doing to uplift and empower young women. For those in Central Florida, you can join the Let's Spill the Tea event on September 28th at Valencia College West Campus. I hope you enjoy this conversation. My favor, as usual, is to please continue to share this podcast with others. It would mean so much if you would also rate it and leave me feedback. If you would like to help keep this podcast going and become a patron of the show, visit my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to make a donation. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Monica. Thank you so much for joining me on my podcast.
Oh my goodness. You don't know how much I look forward to this and just seeing you again. Thank you for being on the station with us.
Yes, that was such a joy. And, you know, we met at the Orlando Magic Game Changer event. And, you know, since then, it's been just amazing because we've got to hang out now. And I'm such a fan of your work. And just the way you also interviewed, I'm like, wow, I'm learning. Let me take some notes over here at this. And I got to be at the radio station. It was super official, y'all. And I will put that into the show notes as well. But I was so fascinated that I thought it would be a great opportunity to sit down, get to know you better, and also let our audience know about you, especially those of us here in Central Florida, because you do so much for the community. But at the same time, not everybody knows about it. It's so amazing how we are in such a big little town. It's like, you may or may not know everything going on, and then at the same time it's like, oh, I had no idea this was happening. So we definitely want to hear more about you, but I like to kind of rewind and go all the way back, and I want to hear about like where you grew up and you know, where were you? I mean, because I saw that you lived all over in terms of work, but I want to know about your childhood, if you don't mind sharing.
No, I don't, and thank you so much for having me. Really, this is a true honor. So I'm a New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker. First, we lived in a one-bedroom apartment on 157th Street, which would be considered Sugar Hill. All right. And then we moved downtown for an extra bedroom. Into the projects. All right. And if you know anything about projects, it truly was a government-issued project, and the I guess you would call it the childhood, all of the influences and all of that, and I just never wanted to be caught up. I just always wanted more, and I definitely wasn't like better than, but I just wanted more. I didn't want to just play on that playground. I wanted to see more. I didn't want to just sit on that park bench. I wanted to sit on Riverside Drive's park bench or Central Park's park bench. I was always that kid that wanted more. Didn't go to the neighborhood school, so was definitely ostracized for that, and bullied even. And
so let me pause right there, because I want our listeners to really get a gauge, and I actually don't have a ton of experience growing up in like that city life, but Oscar did, and so we have been able to kind of compare notes growing up. I'm like, you know, I had a very suburban life where I didn't walk to school or bus to school or a subway, or you know, I didn't have that experience. And he grew up in like East New York, you know, back in 80s, where I think there was actually a documentary on the worst precinct, and it was the one that was right by his house. So I have this kind of vision, but I'd love for our audience to really understand what that's like, because I feel like there's so much disconnect from what we see on TV, and there is in his recollection and in looking back just a heightened level of anxiety that you have growing up when you are in fear of looking over your shoulder, having to walk even just to the corner could be you know, problematic. So I mean, for you, did you feel all of that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the fact that I was kind of a tougher girl, so you couldn't trick me into doing anything. I really was also a loner too. And when O talked about his precinct, well, if you remember the Central Park 5 and Donald Trump, well, that was the precinct that was for the projects where I grew up in. So all of that was very in the now. That pizza parlor right across the street, all of that very in the now. And one of the things that I knew that I wanted to do was radio. I knew in middle school what I wanted to do, and I would have these whole scenarios. Mind you, I was not a talkative child, I really kept to myself. And maybe a little bit weird on the fact that growing up in that area, you are not exposed to a lot of learning, and I love to read. You're not exposed to a lot other than the quadrant where you are. And my father was a musician. I traveled with him, you know, from time to time. The Apollo Theater was a second home. You know, so just exposed at an early age to some good things and some not so good things. You learn how to temper it all, and you learn how to be strong. You know, had fights growing up, you know, it's just, things just happen. And then going away was the one thing that really, I think, saved my life.
So, you know, you mentioned that you didn't go to school in the neighborhood.
I didn't.
And because I know in New York there are opportunities to, you know, take tests and go to different schools
and I did.
In advance. And and again, you, like you said, you're ostracized, because Oscar always talked about, you know, I was like, I had to go all the way to Queens, and people didn't even believe where I lived because it was so far. And so, but now coming back
on the train.
And coming back to your hood, though, it's people where you think you're better than me.
All the time.
There's a lot of that.
All the time.
So how did you cope with that? Because you're this strong, incredible woman now, but like you said, you weren't always who you are today. And so, you know, what were some of the methods you used to be able to kind of handle that type of pressure? Because I don't know of the kids these days could be like handling in the same, I mean, granted, some do because they are in the same scenario, but it just seems like there's, you know, as a teacher, I work with a lot of kids, and even just how I taught in the 90s, 2000s is different than today. You have a different dynamic. I mean, some good, some bad, but how did you kind of get through those times?
It was difficult, I will say that. A couple of things. The fact that you couldn't bully me was one thing, and if I had to fight, Mimi, I fought. If I had to, with my mouth, I could do it, you know, but I was not that instigator kind, and I wasn't the kind that was going to bully you, but I stood up for myself, and I stood up for my friends as well. Yeah, I did. On the train and buses at a very, like, elementary school, at a very early age, you know, and I was talking about that the other night, the things that you're exposed to in New York City subways. There needs to be more police protection there, I gotta tell you, because kids going back and forth to school, there's fighting on those trains, but there are men on those trains that do weird things, and I'll just leave it like that. And that was one of the things that, you know, just really unnerved me. And it also kept me from doing a lot of after school things because I was afraid of coming home on the subway too late.
Well, you're way braver, because O said he would never take the subway because it was too scary. He stayed above ground. And it would be longer, but he was like, I'm too scared. Because he had seen so many things.
Oh my God!
And so that's pretty,
just exposed, exposed to a lot. And thank you for asking me about that, because there are a lot of things, scenarios that you just put out of your mind because they are very painful, very traumatic. But I can't say that it was all bad, because I had a really good childhood. But I did, like I said, I wanted more. I wanted more. And I always tell the story about being in elementary school, and a little boy asked me for my phone number. And I said, I don't think I should do that but tell me why you want my number. He said, I just want to hear you talk.
Oh.
I said, oh, okay. So I did give him my phone number, but that made me think, like, how do I sound?
Yes.
What made him say that to me?
Yeah.
And then later down the line, I had this love affair with radio. Not so much for the songs that were playing, but for the DJs.
So who were you tuning into?
I listened to Frankie Crocker. He was the evening night rocker.
Okay.
Yeah, I love the ladies' voices. Vi Higginson, Lamar Renee. Those voices really intrigued me and what they had to say. So I could tell you the music up and down, but it was what they said, the sultriness of it, but not sexy. I don't know if you can feel that balance. Yes. Sultry, but not sexy.
Yeah.
And I knew that there was something in me that I could do that. And so my first year of school, because I had gone to school away and been tested and yada yada, I was kind of ahead once I got to college.
Okay.
So that freshman year was a blur. I kind of did more tutoring than anything else.
Okay.
And there were times when I just didn't go to class. So here's what happened. My English teacher threw some pebbles up at my window and he said, you haven't been to class in, like, I can't even tell you when. We have our exams. Are you going to come? He said, better yet, be in my office in 5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So I got myself together. I went to see him, and Mimi, this man read me like he was my dad.
Wow.
What are you doing? Why are you doing? What are you even here for? You know, and I couldn't give him answers as fast as the questions were coming. And then he said, you know what I see you doing? And I was like this at this point. He said, I see you in front of a camera or behind a microphone. And I said, you don't know, but that's exactly what I want to do. And he said, you're not going to get it here. So that was what's called a traditional HBCU, a historic black college university. So he said, you're just not going to get it here.
Okay.
So I went to the library, did some research, and I wanted to go back to New York and figured out a school and got into it, got accepted, and went to school and came out with a bachelor's, and that was in May, and by September was on the air in Washington, D.C.
Wow. So I love this, background, because you come across so passionate in what you do. And I could tell from just being able to visit you in your environment and the radio station, it felt like, okay, this is her home. And then, like, she goes home to, like, sleep and eat and do the thing. Like me and my come from school. I feel that, right? You're not like, I'm going to work, right? Like, I love the fact when I meet someone that's so passionate about what they do. And part of the programming that I do on my podcast, I love talking to people that I consider like a master of what they do. And this is such mastery because, you knew from a very young age this was something you had a passion for, and then you went after it regardless of what obstacle was in your way. You made it sound like, this happened, then this happened, then I went to the university, but I realized that there were so many hurdles and obstacles that even got you to that first job in DC. Because I want our listeners to really understand, like, it wasn't easy. You know what I mean?
No,
you're making it sound easy. But what was, like, one of the biggest obstacles that you thought, you know what, maybe I'm not going to get to that point? I mean, I'm sure you always thought, because you're clearly very positive and you're a visionary, but there must have been times where it was like, wow, this rock is pretty tough to move.
I knew all along it was going to be tough because you don't have a lot of women in radio. You just don't. And on television, even fewer. So what I started doing was, and I didn't drive, you guys, so I would be on the Greyhound bus.
That's such a New Yorker thing. I don't drive.
I would be on, I don't drive. I didn't at that time. And it snows up where I went to school. And it would be like thigh high, and you if you're the first one to go to class that morning, you
paved the way.
Yeah, you did. And so, and so I would make my way over to the Greyhound bus. I had internships in Rochester, New York, in Buffalo, New York, wherever there was a radio or television station that would accept me. And trust me, I am just a sophomore at that point. And internships don't usually start until your junior or senior year. I wanted to get as much as I could. So I kind of fudged it
Yeah.
I fudged it.
All right.
And I worked at both television and radio the entire time I was there. And I also was the first black female on the campus radio station too.
Okay.
Didn't even think in terms of that then.
Right.
I just knew I wanted to get on that mic.
Yeah.
And so a lot of trial and error. And then after graduation, it was funny. You don't come out prepared. You don't. I grab students and have them work with me. It was a student who put together half of the questions that I asked you. Mm-hmm. You know, I want them to ask me questions, and I pay. I do what I have to do to get these kids, because a degree is not going to do it for them. The school is just not set up. I don't even care if the professor has had experience. If it's not true lived experience, you can't tell them how it feels to work in a radio station and you're the only female there. Mm-hmm. You can't tell them how it feels when it's your first day on the job and the person getting off says, well, you're on your own. You've not seen the board. You know, you're seeing it for the first day and you have to figure it out. It's a very cold world that I work in.
I believe it.
It is.
I wonder though as well, and I would love for you, if you don't mind, sharing a bit about that experience, not as just a woman, but as a black woman in the field, because people really, I don't think, realize like, oh, it's 2024. Those obstacles are done now. I'm like, please. They're it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back sometimes. And so,
truly
for you, like you said, you had to kind of stand on your own. And in my mind, your upbringing of being able to, you know, out-bully the bullies, push your way through, survive, like all of that was training for whatever came next. And it certainly in radio, it must have felt a lot like being in the projects. And maybe it's a high-tech environment, but it doesn't mean people give you the respect you're due.
You truly have to earn it. And you are only as good as your last air check. And they tell you that all the time. I remember walking into a station, and I won't say what city, and the morning show host did not know that I was coming. Now that's poor management.
Yes, yeah.
And so I was sitting in a different room because I was there to do news. And when I went in there to just greet her, Mimi, she looked me up and down like I was a piece of you know what, and it was definitely no love there. And it took a while. I'm trying to win her over, but I'm also trying to just like earn my stripes in my gig. I'm a team player. That's one thing. I will cut for whomever, but you don't always get it back. But that doesn't stop me from doing it. And that's how I teach my interns. Yeah, so no matter what.
And you bring up interns, which I love. Because we do the same thing here, and I really believe in also not just having those interns learn about the craft and what you're doing and the process, because you, like you said, hands-on experience is really the only way to learn. You can read a book about all the stuff, you can take these tests, but I'm like, what good does this do? But what have you learned as the teacher and mentor to these students? Because I find as a teacher, it's like, well, I don't know who's getting the lessons here. Is it me or is it them? Because you learn so much about yourself, right?
It's give and take. It really is give and take. I get the technology side because they really hip me to a lot of stuff, and hip me is probably a very old phrase, excuse me, but they give me lessons on that. But you know what? I can teach you anything you want to know about radio, but what I'm really there for, what I'm really wanting to put into these young people is how to show up on time. How to dress appropriately, how to run a comb through your hair.
Professionalism.
Yes, how to greet people, how to be bright. And I don't mean just educationally, how really to be bright, to smile, how to really, don't be so standoffish. Now that's one thing, you gotta do whatever you have to do to get in until you fit in. So teaching them those kind of skills.
Yeah, critical thinking.
Yes, come on, yes.
It's amazing because it's such a undervalued set of skills that I feel is missing from maybe the elementary age. Like I feel like there's so much in our school system. That's a whole nother conversation, right?
And it is,
empowering our kids with better tools than standardized tests. That's just my opinion, y'all.
Yes,
but
we should be. We should be. I also try to teach them empathy.
Yeah, of course.
Because that's so necessary.
What do you find that in your lessons of empathy, like, is there a wow moment for them, or the light bulb that you see goes on? Is there a moment where you're going, wow, they just don't get it? I mean, what has been your experience? Because I find that is something really hard to teach.
Empathy is very hard to teach, but I try to teach by example, so that they can really get that it's not only about this gig. I really want more for you.
Yeah.
And when I show them all of the things that are possible, then they begin to get it. When I give them room to grow, like I've given my interns a 30-minute segment on real radio. You know, who does that? But they came to me with an idea, or actually I told them, I said, you know, it's not just about making sure that everything is right for me. What do you want out of this? And I said, give me a topic. Let me see how you're gonna and they put it together. They were really good. So giving kids, that's showing them empathy. You're not gonna get that everywhere, because I sure didn't get that.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, and it's so unfortunate, but amazing that you do that. I was very interested actually in your process, because, you know, as a fellow podcaster, but nowhere near as extensive experience as you have. But I'm always curious about process. And you mentioned, I empower my interns to look up the questions and do the research, and you know what is kind of your process for like how you like to prepare as a journalist? I mean, just selfishly, I'm taking notes here, everybody. So I love learning.
So I will tell you something. I'm not opposed to AI every now and then. I will do that, but I'm not going to verbatim.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So I am looking up, like, to prepare for you.
Yeah.
I had to look on your website. I watched videos. I did the whole. Ooh, let me see the Mulan. Let me see the resemblance. I did all of that so I could have just generic conversation. I listened to you as you were talking. And being a good interviewer, you have to be able to listen, because your next question is not on the paper, it's in your head. And I try to tell them that all the time. I don't care how prepared you think you're going to be, that guest is going to throw you a curve, because sometimes they don't answer the question that you've given them.
You're queuing them up and you're like, come on. and you're like, all right, I guess we're going over there.
Yeah, you're right. So you got to learn how to bring them back. You know? And so they don't teach that in school, Mimi. So that's just trial and error. And empathy does lead the way, especially when it comes to, I've interviewed some elders, and that takes a lot of coaxing and prodding to stay on point.
Of course.
You know, but I just love people, and I just love talking with them and learning. History just, you know, just really impresses me.
Yeah,
you know?
And you've interviewed such all walks of life of humans. I'm curious as to, I never like to ask, what's your favorite interview? But what I would like to know is, has there been an interview that you went into and then coming out of it, you were like, wow, I did not expect that? Or, you know, the curveball that went the right direction, not the disaster ones that you're like, whoo, this person gave me nothing. But I'm sure there's been so many people that you've spoken to that, I mean, and it could be literally like the janitor at XYZ, like people you just don't, that are always underestimated, or that their story that they never told, and because of like your conversational style, I feel like you have such a way of putting people at ease. I'm sure there has been conversations that even you walked away from, regardless of how prepared, that you were really surprised by what kind of you came out of it with. I mean, is there a conversation that comes to mind?
So I'm going to give you three very quickly. Most recently, Mr. Reed, Desmond Reed, because he's an older gentleman, and we talked through his stories, and I learned about him, and I just let him talk. And I just let him talk, and I learned so much from this man. This man has developed one of the largest black bookstores that still is in existence in that Longwood area. So that's one person. And I'm trying to get him to call me back so I can put you guys in touch.
Amazing.
So he's one person that I could say recently. I interviewed Barack Obama during the Hillary Clinton campaign, and it was a very brief, less than 10 minutes, and it was funny. He answered all of my questions just fine, but when it came to, I pulled in some radio station questions, like what would you want to ask he wasn't feeling those questions. He really wanted to stick to his points. He really did. And my questions were to the point about that campaign, about Hillary. I could just tell, he's stumping, so he doesn't have a lot of time. But an interview that floored me, and I still get goosebumps, like right now, if you touch my arm, I have goosebumps, is when I interviewed the Honorable, the Honorable Minister Farrakhan, Louis Farrakhan. I don't think I was prepared for my emotions. That was probably to date one of the most, I don't know, I put everything into it. So much so, when you walk in the room with the Honorable Minister, you think it's him in the chair, but it's not. It's somebody who is safely sitting there because you're in front of windows and you never know when something could happen. And then when he came in ever so quietly. But guess what I did? And I've learned to do this. If you have people, like with Oscar, I wouldn't so much want to talk with you before our interview. I want to talk to Oscar. And that's what I did. I talked to his handlers. And I learned about I knew that he was a violinist, but I didn't know that he had CDs that he was sitting on and, So anyway, that for me was I think by far one of my greatest interviews. The emotion got me so far up to here that when it was over, I went into a corner and cried. I had to let my emotion out that way. That thing was deep. It was deep. That was a once in a lifetime. And because he's so controversial, and he only gives like 10-minute pops, ours was almost an hour.
Amazing.
Oh my God, I just kept, and no notes in front of me, I just kept, feeding off of him, feeding off of him. So God gifted me with this, and I don't take it for granted. Words are my thing, and making people feel comfortable, those are my superpowers.
Yeah, and you do such a great job.
Thank
and
you.
I noticed that from the very first time we met, which of course was at the Game Changer event. And what I thought was really cute was because we just talked about people not taking the cue, and you kind of did this like, I'm gonna let you know when you're going too long. And I was going, I hope everyone's paying attention because Monica, she means business. I think also, ironically, there was a concert everybody was trying to get to, and you're like, you need to wrap this up.
It was
Lionel Richie.
Lionel Richie and Earth, Wind and Fire.
How was that?
It was very nice. It was very nice.
Amazing.
But it's certain things like that I don't want to miss. Just because I work all the time.
You have to have a balance.
And so about 10 years ago, 11 in November, he reminds me, I met a really wonderful man on a blind date. I had never been on a blind date before in my life.
So blind date, who set you up?
A mutual friend. I was hosting something by the arena, and it was a concert. It was a show going on in this cafe, this little club. And this older couple walked in, and they went straight back towards the bar, and nobody was sitting back there. So I went because I said, she looks like somebody I remember, because I had just moved back here. And I went over and I said, I do remember you. I said, do you remember me? And she said, yeah, I remember you. And then I said, I love what you got going on. She thought I was talking about some jewelry. I loved the rapport. They were leaning into each other and just into it. And I said, I just got back here. It's not even been a full year. And I was just wondering, do you know anybody like my age? She said so loud, I can't believe Monica May can't get a date. Mimi, I was so embarrassed because I did have a date that night, and he was sitting like not too far. But what I wanted was tomorrow. I wanted another and another. And she said, well, let me think about it. And I gave her my number. She called me the next day and said, one of my good friends owns a catering company. He's a chef. Would that bother you? I said, a black man with his own company? No. Cooking? That's not something I like to do. So anyway, we met, and the rest is history. We never parted after that, and it was a conversation that went on and on and on, and it would be phone calls, long text messages, like we were in high school.
Amazing. And so where'd you go on the blind date?
We went to Moonfish.
Oh yeah, Moonfish over in Sand Lake.
And then
that's
really interesting. I'm
just curious where a chef would take someone, because you know the bar is high for them. You're just like, where would they go to eat?
So that's actually where he proposed to me 2 years later. We waited 2 years, and this was the interesting thing, was that we both, been in relationships before. He had been married, and we really wanted to get this one right. And so by our second date, we were sitting in a restaurant, Buca de Beppo.
Okay.
And he laid out his hands and he said, what's next? And he gave my whole name. My government name is Robin Monica May. And I said, to become Mrs. George Ashford. And he didn't snatch his hands away. He didn't say, check please. He didn't say any of that. He said, this is good. This is really good. So I didn't scare him off.
Okay, well, obviously not. And so talk to me about CB Bistro.
So that's what we owned together. That was really funny, because he had gigs like East Side, West Side, all over. And he wasn't partial to any one kitchen. And I said, wouldn't it be something, because I'm renting space to do my teas, my Let's Spill the Tea. And if we could find maybe a tea room, mind you, Mimi, I know nothing about tea, because that's not tea, what by the way, tea.
That's my thing.
Okay, then you got to come and give my girls a story on that. But the funny thing is that we found a realtor right away, found a house. We went to look at it. I said, do you know, to not own this and to reconfigure this kitchen, a whole conversion of this kitchen to make it for what that would be ridiculous, and we don't own this property. Let's go back. Let's find something else. Let's find a brick and mortar. And 2 days later, she found, and I dreamt it, Mimi, I dreamt it, the exposed ceilings. I wanted a brick floor. I wanted this. Everything was there.
Amazing.
So the front part is where we do our community meetings, and when I do a tea, it's right there. The kitchen is, we serve over 1,000 people daily, because he has schools, he has this, he has that. Everything comes out of that kitchen. So we got what we both wanted right there in Metro West.
Perfect.
So it's great.
And now that we've talked about the tea, and let's spill the tea, I really want to dive in and understand more, because you started to share when you interviewed me at the radio station, and I was so moved by your story and the connection with your daughter, and just how all this has come to be. And of course, there's a huge event coming, so we want to hear all about it.
I'm so excited. Mimi, you don't know, I got this idea. My daughter and I, very, very, very close. I was a single mom. And so, and we just left Sarasota the other day, and she lives in St. Pete, but she's a travel speech language pathologist. She just happened to be home this weekend, so she was able to come have dinner with us. And so he said, what did it feel like, moving around so much? And you know what she said? It was just a way of life. She provided so well for me. It just seemed normal. And it gave me the capacity to make friends wherever I go. So she said, whatever city I'm in, that I visit, that I work in, I 9 times out of 10 know somebody there. So, but what happened years ago was, there is a place here for teenage pregnant girls. And I would go when I was asked to speak there, and just talk about my life and just talk about some things, because very early on there were some things, and it's too much for your audience right now, but if you come to a tea, if you come to a tea, well, we talk about drugs, we talk about sex, we talk about alcohol, we talk about just the things that kids do and the things that I was doing.
Yeah, real
and
life.
I wanted more for these girls. Like I said, I wanted more.
Yeah.
And I started seeing a couple of girls coming back. No, then you haven't gotten the message. These are not doll babies. These are real human beings.
Yeah.
And I was already doing a program for juvenile justice where the girls, once they were released, they would have to go through 6 weeks of training with me.
Okay.
And it was about communication skills. It was about etiquette. It was about holding your temper. It was about, and I mean, I don't have degrees in any of these things. I just see myself in so many of these girls. And I remember being that tough girl that nobody bothered. Why didn't they bother her? But she didn't bother anybody else. And that's what I wanted girls to, just that confidence. And so with the teenage pregnant girls, I got there early one day and I used to drive this, I still have it, a green sports car. And I sat in my car and I had a legal pad and I wrote my life out from the time I was 12, that first big mistake that I made, dating somebody that was older in the projects, up until that day. And I did it in third person. No one knew I was talking about me. So when I was talking about all of the bad things, they were like whispering amongst themselves. But here's how I always end the letter. That girl has come full circle now. And she's now the producer and talent for like the Tom Joyner show or the Steve Harvey show or whatever show I was doing. You get the biggest gasp. But yeah, that was me. That was me making those mistakes. That was me almost losing my life. That was me that got thrown out of a car. That was me that still has the scars from my childhood, physical scars. You know, I don't want that for you girls. And so then they got still. And what it was that I did the same thing when I left Orlando, moved to Houston, Texas. And I was working with kids. I love working with middle and high school girls. They're the hardest girls to get through, but I love them. And I was in a chapel one night and God said, "Where's that letter?" And I had the letter with me and I read the letter. The church was rocking Mimi and the adults got it. The adults were boo-hoo crying. That was their life. The girls were like, "Oh my God, once again, that's your life?" Yeah. So I decided then, and my daughter walked up to me and she had tears come, but everybody was crying. I was crying. She said, "Mom, I knew you were strong and I knew you'd gone through some things, but man, to know that you went through some of that stuff and you're still, man, you're strong." And so from there, I just decided, I told her everything before, I went deeper into, because generational curses are hard to break unless you talk about them.
Right.
So you got to talk about alcoholism. You got to talk about drugs. Got to talk about, you know, pubescent sex. You got to talk about it.
Absolutely.
You got to talk about
a
it.
huge advocate for wanting kids at a younger age to start learning about body awareness, sex education.
Absolutely.
This is the problem, is the lack of education. And, you know, you mentioned, oh, you know, your audience. I'm like, we talk about everything. So feel free to be unfiltered on the show.
That was it. That was it.
It's so important for especially someone like yourself who is so esteemed and people look at and be like, wow, she's got this perfect life.
Yeah,
and she's got this great job, and it was so, you know, it's all laid out, and they only see the end, and they just don't know about the beginning and the hardship, and not that what I say has any weight to it, but definitely, you know, thank you for being so open and honest and being able to do that for others, because, you know, that 12-year-old self, like you said, oh, I made a mistake. I'm like, as a child, you know, it's hard when you're not protected, and that when you are able to forgive yourself, or you look at yourself as who you are as an adult, and you realize, no, the decision I made as a child, you need to protect that person. And so I'm clearly you are empowered, and you are who you need to be now. But I do hope that you know, that like I feel for you, and I feel for the 12-year-old you, and I
That's
definitely
empathy.
and I definitely, you know, want you to know, like, it's so appreciated, even if you're making an impact on one person, which clearly you're making an impact on more than one, but it matters. Like,
you know,
your strength matters.
Thank you. So what I did was came up and I listened to God with everything, and I don't always ask him. He just gives it to me, gives me titles, gives me all kinds of things. Let's Spill the Tea came from him.
Yeah.
And he said, what if you got these girls with their moms over some tea, but you just name it that. And so I did the first one with 2 other people.
Yeah.
And I found that I like working by myself. Let's Spill the Tea meant something different to them.
Okay.
But I knew where my tea was coming from.
Okay.
And so, you know, again, I just embarked on this. I made it a 501c3. I don't have any money in it, but what I do is I continue to do these 90-minute teas with these girls. They're 14 to 21. And now with their dads, this is so funny. I had a father, several dads. How come you don't do this for fathers? I mean, some of us are in our girls' lives, or some of us are single dads,
Absolutely.
or some of us do pick our daughters up, and we, you know, we're having issues now too.
Yeah.
The father, it's called ties and tea. Whew, that is really emotional. Dads don't have as much of an idea of what their girls are going through.
Right, of course.
So, so what I'm doing on September 28th at Valencia, and thank you so much, shout out to Valencia, Dr. Plinsky. I just told her what my vision was, and I told her I wanted to invite as many parents and their kids in for the day and feed them breakfast and lunch, but have 20 to 25-minute pop conversations going on simultaneously. The middle school girls are here, high school girls are in another room, and I just have speakers going in, and it's just question and answer. Get on the floor, cry, scream, do whatever you want to do. And then I have speakers for the parents if some dads want to come. And so the flyer will say mother and daughter, but dads, please know that you're welcome. I'm going to get them to change that for me, because I do realize this could be really, and I work a lot more with mental health folk, and so there will definitely be some counseling going on and ways this is something else. In my tea, I always have a mental health counselor there with me. And if that mother and daughter chooses, or that father and daughter, because that's happened before too, that counseling is what they know that they need, I will pay for the first couple of sessions. And again, where am I getting the money from? He's given me everything that I need. That's it. And so I just feel it is my mission. And I'm an open book. You can ask me anything that you want. And my daughter she comes up with some doozies. Now, my daughter's 35 now. We've been doing this maybe 10 years or a little bit more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, but the whole concept of the mother-daughter thing goes back to when she was a teenager.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, that's very brave. And it definitely, I think it's just such a difficult thing for teenagers, especially those with single parents that don't feel that connectivity, because my very limited work with some of the task force and things that I've been on is that, a lot of these single parents aren't bad parents, but they're working like 3 jobs in order to feed their children.
And so,
and so then there's no parenting for these kids, and that's where you get the drugs, and you get, you know, early exposure to teen pregnancies, and you get, and it's so hard because it's this vicious cycle that we're in, and it's like, how do you break that cycle? And this is certainly one of the ways, having open conversations and then allowing them to have a space they can feel safe in. So that's incredible.
And the whole premise of this is that the same conversation that the girls are getting, the moms are getting, the adult abridged version. That way you have something. And then I also do tabletop questions too, so when they finally get back together, they have something to go from. So it must be really rewarding, but also intense. Draining. Oh yeah, all of that.
You know,
it is intense and it is draining, but I gotta tell you, I can't see me doing anything different. this is it.
Yeah.
That's my passion.
Well, I will definitely list all of that here so anybody in the Central Florida area can know about it.
Yes.
Is this like an open invite?
Yes.
So please attend. If you have questions, I'll have all the links here. And before we wrap up, we have to talk about your radio show, your podcast, your actual your day-to-day where we get to hear your sultry voice.
Oh, thank you. So in 2019, I decided to come off the radio. And I made the decision after the syndicated person that I had been doing for 13 years decided to retire. And I had been asking for 2 years. So who are you going to put in mornings now? What are you going to do? Would you ever think about creating a morning show? My first gig in radio was Morning Drive. Whatever, there's not something that I couldn't do.
Yeah.
And they chose not to tell me who the person was going to be or if they even thought about building a show around me. So I took it as, a little bit of a slap. You're going to make me go 2 full years. This is crazy. Mm-hmm. So that let me know that they weren't banking on me. So I continued to come in because the syndicated show was still going on. But when he left and I got my final word on who was up next, I love him dearly as a performer, but I just didn't want another performer. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be sandwiched in that. I'd heard the show in other markets and I'm like, these are gonna be some critical times ahead of us. And I just loved the show that I was on, and it was the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And I have nothing against the next show that came in, but I just knew it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And God also said, it's time. It's time. And he spoke very clearly to me too that I had done well and it was time to move on. And so that's when I, brought my name, slapped communications on it, and just started doing, my podcast, which is One Take Live.
Yeah.
Another thing that he gave me that name for, I do my commercials in one take. I study, and then and if I do it again, I'm going to mess up. So I try to put everything into one take. So I do that, and the One Take Live I call it edutainment, mm-hmm. because it is educational, but I have artists on there. I have gospel artists. I have R&B artists on there. I have regular just activities that are going on in the community. We do political stuff. I mean, it's my show, so I can do whatever I want to do.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I love it.
Yeah.
I really love it. It kept me going through the pandemic. That's when I first started it.
Yeah.
And then I kind of put it aside. And then my granddaughter, who is now 23,
wow,
came to stay with me. And she said, what about... And so that's how the whole thing just picked up again. And so we've done, I don't know how many episodes. We're taking a break through the month of August so I can just really focus on the tea. And then we'll get back September 1 so I can start promoting the tea. But I just needed some time off.
And I mean, you are entitled to time off.
Yes.
There's nothing like work-life balance.
Right.
Final question. So what do you do for your time off? What do you do to decompress?
Getting ready to go on a cruise. I like to cruise. I like to travel. Yes, I love that.
Where you
then to Bermuda, but we're going to New York first.
Okay.
And I want to see a play. I want to go to Harlem Week. And I think I want to go to Governor's Island, take a ferry over to Governor's Island because they've done some wonderful things over there. So I want to do that. And so yeah, we're going to do that. But just got back from Sarasota. Why did I pick Sarasota? Because it's sleepy.
Yes, right.
It's really sleepy.
I love the West Coast.
And I wanted good weather. So 3 days, went down, saw my daughter, had dinner, and then just laid out by the pool, just did nothing. Just, and if I just do a couple of days like that every now and then, I'm good to go.
That's your recharge.
That's how I recharge. I get away. We just get in the car and go. Even if it's Daytona Beach. I just like to go.
We're so fortunate here, right? We have so many options, especially during the pandemic. I was like, we're going to the beach. And I don't normally go to the beach, but since the pandemic, it was the thing to do.
Yes.
And I said, how grateful, how fortunate are we? We could just drive to the coast,
But it was so sad seeing some of my favorite places on the beach, especially in Daytona.
Okay.
wiped away. Their poolside wiped away.
Okay.
They've rebuilt since then, but that was really sad. That was really, really, really sad. And then, you know, the tide was like way up, almost in the street in some places in Daytona. So, you know, we really, they struggled to rebuild. But yeah, we are blessed.
We are blessed. And so I am blessed to have you on the show. Thank you so much
for
having this conversation.
Having me.
Amazing.
I hope it was what you were expecting.
I only expected to spend time with you, and it has
exceeded
my expectations.
Thank you.
Exceeded my expectations.
I love the way she talks with her hands.
I'm a martial artist. You know, a lot of movement all the time.
I am getting ready to take a tour, so I'm excited.
Yes, yeah, we're in the Cultural Center, everybody, at the Wallem Cultural Center. Those of you on YouTube with us, and you've seen this place before, but now I get to show it off to Monica, so very special.
I'm excited.
Thank you so much.
You.
I will make sure we list all of your social media where they can follow you. You can shout out your social media if you want to make sure people are following you, and also where they can hear about all of your shows.
So One Take Live, Monica May, One Take Live is on YouTube, and we're on Spotify and Apple, all of those platforms. And then the T is info at Let's Spill the Tea, no apostrophes or anything, .org.
All right, and we'll list that here. Thank you so much, Monica May, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to The Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.